This week on Comics You Crave, Ryan, we have a great comic from Dark Horse Comics. Would you like to tell the people what it is?
Yes, we got King's Road #1. It's on sale February 10th. It's written by Peter Hogan, and let's see, the artwork by Phil Winslade, Staz Johnson, and Staz Johnson's the one that did that cover that Brian was just showing everybody. This is the #1 issue is a 42-page one. It's kind of a double-sized issue. Still only $3.99, so that's a nice plus.
48 pages.
48.
Yeah, don't short those extra 6.
Yeah. So it was 48 pages. I was looking at another thing. That's a 2. So, let's see. So,
well, what did you think? What was your initial impression?
My initial impression was when I finished reading it, I felt like I was scrolling to go to the next page, and it wouldn't go to the next page, and I was getting pissed off, and I had to re-download it because I thought like maybe there was something wrong, like it didn't like download correctly, or it didn't get all of it. And then my second viewing, I scrolled all the way back down, like, oh shit, that was the end. And I don't know if that's a good indication of if I really wanted to read the next one, because it felt like it was short still, even though it was 48 pages long.
Yeah.
It still felt short, like there's still a lot of the story to tell that you were expecting that was going to be, in that kind of build-up phase. Yeah. So,
well, before we get into too much about the details about our opinion on the comic, for everybody listening, so basically this comic, what it's about is, as you can kind of see the cover, it definitely has a little fantasy look to it. In my opinion, it's kind of a throwback to the 80s fantasy novels and 80s fantasy movies. Basically, yes. It's about an average family who all of a sudden gets kind of brought back into this fantasy world that a guy's brother is killed, and now he's the new king, and there's this magic land that's now kind of merging with the real land.
Well, it's not merging.
Well, it's not merging, but it's
a separate. It's like it's a world that there's a separate world.
So it's a separate world, but there's magical creatures that are now coming into the real world, our world, after this new royal family. If we sound a little confused, it's because, to Ryan's point about you kind of wanted more for. One of my big criticisms of this book is, considering it's 48 pages, it's 3 issues. The first issue is 48 pages. It doesn't really explain much. There's a lot of setup without really telling you what it's setting up. So it's in some ways it's a hard comic to review because it doesn't really tell you a lot. Basically, it's a blend of a fantasy and kind of I don't know. It's almost like Narnia to an extent.
Yeah.
But
it's got a blend. It's a modern world that we live in Earth, but there's also this fantasy world that's got trolls and all kinds of crazy looking monsters and a sorceress, witch that.
Yeah, she killed the king. So basically, if I didn't do a good job explaining it, the evil witch kills the king, the current king, and now his brother, who's next in line, is now the king. And so basically,
she's been hiding out on Earth because he apparently doesn't want anything to do with
it seems like he's on the Earth Witness. It seems like he's on the Earth Witness Protection Program. So there's people watching over his kids. His kids have no idea that they're part of some fantasy royal family, but now that he's the next king in line, the sorceress has sent people to try and kill the new royal family. So unfortunately, like I said, like Ryan was talking about earlier, it's 48 pages. You don't get a lot of setup. You get a lot of setup, but you don't get a lot of answers. You're left very confused after a very big issue. Luckily, because it's only 3 issues, I kind of want to read more because there's enough story there that's intriguing that says, I kind of want to know. To your point, I was hitting the next one because I wanted to see what the next page was. Yeah. But it definitely didn't knock it out of the park with its first issue, which really was a double issue.
It was good. It wasn't, I think it's still worth picking up. I think it might be more something that you pick up as a trade instead of a single issue. And like you kind of said earlier about, the 80s, it does kind of have like an 80s artwork kind of feel to it. The lines are a lot, how do you put it? Like the artwork is just a lot more.
It doesn't have the sharp lines. It has almost like a watercolor look to it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean it kind of looks like 80s kind of comic book, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's drawn really well. I like how the characters looks and stuff.
Well, and 80s cartoons too. Honestly, if you really want to bring it back, it's definitely got that 80s animated feel to it.
Mm-hmm. And I liked that. I mean, it looked nice to me, and the story was, like I said at the very beginning. I got down to the end and I had to read down on it because I thought I didn't get the whole story because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. So
yeah, and I almost feel like the 48 pages was a detriment. I feel like the creator knew that he had a double issue that he had to work with, so he kind of spread. One of the beautiful things about comic books is because you only have a small amount of pages to work with, you tend to move the story along really fast, and you get to the point really quickly, so you can get to where you're going fast. And I feel like this, because it had the extra, it had a lot of. It took its time in developing something that. I think when me and you were talking about it originally, I said it was the longest comic book that felt short.
Yeah.
So
that's definitely true.
But ultimately, I guess at the end of the day, what do we feel? What do we feel about King's Road?
I liked it. I think that if I were to suggest it to someone, I would probably tell them to wait for the trade, just because it has a feel that it'll be something that's better read in a beginning to end kind of sequence. Like it's gonna be the whole story. Just because it feels like you are kind of getting cut off, and then you're kind of like, oh. So yeah, that's my feel.
All right, well, I would piggyback off what you said, and I completely agree. If you want to read this, my recommendation is to wait for all 3 issues to show up in a trade paperback. And much like a Netflix show, I feel like this was written to be binge read and from start to finish in a complete story. But if you are a diehard fantasy fan and you love the 80s type style fantasy, then pick it up and read it. You'll probably really enjoy it. We did not enjoy it. We also it didn't jump off the pages and go, you have to buy this book today. So it has a decent story. The artwork is cool. It's very original. It's a good comic book. It's the first issue. Unfortunately, is not a great comic book, but I am intrigued by the story, and I would say definitely give it a read when it comes out on trade paperback, unless you are a huge fan of 80s
blended fantasy and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's got a good story, and like and I want to read it, but it's something that I definitely, for just how I like to read stuff, I have to have the whole trade.
All right. So as of right now, the first issue comes out when?
February 10th.
February 10th. You can get it for $3.99, and it will be available at your local comic book stop or on digital. Dark Horse Comics.
Dark Horse Digital. I get all my comic books Dark Horse Digital now.
Yep. So. Me too. It's the best way to do it. I do enjoy my trade. I don't have enough space to have like a single issues anymore, so I do enjoy trades. But on that note, there you go.